Now, there's an interesting story about U.S. troops in Louisiana. They were there under the command of a colonel by the guy named Gaines, Gaines. And there were rumors at the time, and there's no smoking gun evidence about this, but there were rumors at the time that Gaines was on the verge of coming into Texas to help the Texans against the Mexican army, that Jackson had sent him there for that very purpose. And the reason that this is important is that after the Alamo, after Goliad, Sam Houston starts retreating towards Louisiana. He starts retreating, and if you look at this map, you'll see San Felipe de Austin near Gonzales, north of Gonzales. And what happens is Sam Houston starts taking the Texas militia east towards what's now Houston, and then maybe north into Louisiana. And there was speculation at the time, and there's still speculation, that what Sam Houston was trying to do was to move the Texas Army towards Louisiana, and that he was going to join up with U.S. troops coming in from Louisiana. So that's the suspicion, that Sam Houston, he's retreating from San Antonio. I mean, he's retreating from kind of the area of Washington on the Brazos, San Felipe de Austin, kind of that area between what's now Houston and San Antonio, a little bit north of I-10. And he starts his army, he starts retreating to the east. And then there's speculation he would have retreated towards Louisiana, and he would have attempted, or maybe there was a plot to bring the U.S. Army into the Texas Revolution. Well, we'll never know if that was what Houston was trying to do, because if you look at this map in East Texas, you'll see Harrisburg, you'll see San Jacinto. And what happened is that Houston's men, his army, the militia under his command, he didn't have really great control over them. And they're furious about what had happened in San Antonio with the Alamo, and especially what had happened in Goliad. They're just, white hot with rage. So they're angry at Sam Houston, because Sam Houston is continuing to retreat away from Santa Anna, and his men don't want to retreat from the Mexican army. They want to face the Mexican army. They want to avenge what had happened at the Alamo. They want to avenge what had happened at Goliad. So when, sorry, I'm looking at something. When Houston gets to the Harrisburg area, his men basically refuse to retreat any further. So that's why we'll never know what Houston's plans were. Was he willing to go to Louisiana to bring in the U.S. Army? We'll never really know, because his men basically wouldn't move. They refused to retreat any further east and any further north. So it's at this point that the famous Battle of San Jacinto occurred. And what happened is that Santa Anna, he pulls up across from the Texans. He puts his army into camp across from the Texans. And then he doesn't really do anything. And so there's like 800 members of the Texas Army. There's about 1,500 members of the Mexican Army, and the Texans attack the Mexicans and surprise them. And again, this is how terrible a general that Santa Anna was, that he let his army be surprised. He outnumbered the Texans by 2-1 almost. But he was surprised. The Texans outflank him, and they defeat his army within a couple of minutes. And at that point, you have the third massacre of the Texas Revolution occur. And the third massacre of the Texas Revolution was the massacre of Mexican soldiers by the Texas soldiers. And this is a massacre that's not much talked about. But in fact, it was bloodier than what had happened at the Alamo, and it was bloodier than what had happened at Goliad. Ultimately, about 630 Mexicans were killed, and only 9 Texans were killed. Now, at San Jacinto, when you have that kind of incredible disparity in casualties, 9 Texans versus over 600 Mexicans, whenever you see those kinds of disparities, you know that there was a battlefield massacre. The Mexican army surrendered very quickly when they were surprised. Santa Anna, we think maybe was in his tent with a young woman that Crisp talks about in the last chapter of his book. So the Mexican army lays down its arms and surrenders, and then the Texans just go on a killing spree. And in fact, Sam Houston tries to stop the massacre of Mexican soldiers, but he couldn't. The Texas soldiers ignored him. He probably literally would have been killed had he really tried to stop the massacre. So over 600 Mexicans are killed. Some had been killed in the initial fighting, but the vast, vast majority of the Mexican soldiers that died in the massacre after the Mexican army surrendered. So the third and bloodiest of the massacres of the Texas Revolution happened, and it happened to Mexican soldiers at the hands of Texas soldiers at San Jacinto. Now, Santa Anna, he escaped from the battlefield. He probably dressed himself up as a civilian, maybe a corporal. What often happened during the 19th century is people would mock defeated leaders by saying they dressed up by a woman. Maybe that happened. I don't know if that happened. But be that as it may, most Texans would not have recognized Santa Anna. There were no pictures of him. And he was captured a couple of days later.